So in part one, we talked about why we need internationalisation at home, and in this part, we're going to talk about exactly what we mean by it. Hopefully, I can give you some examples, and again, I'll be asking you the question at the end as to what this means in your situation. Firstly, I'd like to show you the definition of internationalisation at home, which I developed with Jos Balen in 2015. And this perhaps needs some further discussion. So let's look at the different sections which I've highlighted here. So internationalisation at home is the purposeful integration. So purposeful, we have to do it with a reason and a purpose, and it won't just happen automatically on its own. The purposeful integration of both international and intercultural dimensions. I mentioned both of these in the first part of this video. It's really important to think of not only international elements, but also the intercultural elements, the diversity of populations within your own country, within your own university, whether people come from different religious backgrounds, different countries, and all kinds of different dimensions of culture. And you may have people from different intercultural backgrounds on your campuses. So it's both international and intercultural dimensions that we're talking about here. We're talking about the formal and the informal curriculum, and I'm going to go on to explain that in a few moments. So both the formal and informal curriculum for all students, every student within the university, not only those who can have a mobility experience. And it then says within domestic learning environments. And again, this is important. It's not simply about what happens in the university. We can use, for examples of employers or different local contexts within your domestic learning environment, working with the university to help offer students opportunities to develop their international and intercultural skills. I'm going to mention a few examples of those later on. So this is the definition that Jos and I developed. I hope you can work with it. I hope I've tried to explain it a little bit more. I said I was going to talk about different aspects of the curriculum, and we generally think of three dimensions of curriculum: the formal, the informal, and the hidden. The formal is probably the aspect of it that you're most familiar with. So this is the section of the curriculum which is assessed, meaning the program content or the syllabus, the teaching and learning approaches, the kind of assessment that we use. That is all what we call the formal curriculum. We then have the informal curriculum, which is not assessed. So they are other aspects, the co-curriculum or the different aspects of the curriculum, events, activities which the university arranges. It may be to do with student clubs and associations, but it's those things which are run by the university but not assessed for the student. There's then a third dimension, and I can't go into any detail on this because we don't really have time to, but it's a very important aspect of curriculum. And if you're interested, you can look at the book by Betty Less called Internationalizing the Curriculum, which I'll refer to later. But the hidden curriculum basically are things that we sometimes forget to consider. So you may have heard of examples, for example, where we have exams which are scheduled on days which different religious contexts won't allow people to work on, for example, or some aspects of the academic culture in our local context which we don't explain to students: how to write an essay, how to take part in a seminar or a lecture. We just assume students understand this when they arrive at the university, but we don't always make it clear. So sometimes that hidden curriculum will be very different in different countries and indeed in different universities. So we need to bear in mind that some aspects of the curriculum are hidden from the students and we need to make them clear. But as I say, it's the formal and the informal curriculum which we're going to concentrate on. I now want to show you something that's been developed by the European Association for International Education, the Internationalisation at Home expert community, which I'm the chair of. We've put together these 10 points about what we mean by internationalisation at home. Thinking about offering all students global perspectives within their programme of study, whether or not they have a mobility experience. We need to go beyond electives or specialised programmes. We need to think about mainstream curriculum that every student will experience. We need to think about international and intercultural perspectives through internationalised learning outcomes in the formal curriculum. I'm going to talk about learning outcomes in a few moments. And it's also supported by the informal curriculum activities, which can be available across the institution. Again, I'll give some examples of this. The fifth point, using cultural diversity in the classroom for inclusive learning, teaching and assessment practice. If you have cultural diversity in your context, this can be used very effectively. Point 6, creating opportunities for student engagement with cultural others in the local society, and thinking about, for example, different cultural contexts through singing, music, through cultural groups that you may have in your city or region, and engaging students with those kind of opportunities. Point 7, we need to involve all staff, not only academics and international officers, but everybody has a responsibility for this. And we'll come back to that later on in this series when we talk about comprehensive internationalisation. So we need to think about involving all staff as well as all students. It may or may not include teaching in English or another language that all students understand, lingua franca. But as I said earlier, simply translating the existing curriculum won't actually solve the issue. It will still be the same curriculum, just in a different language. Point 9, it can include what we call virtual mobility through online working with partner universities. You might have heard of Collaborative Online International Learning, COIL, which began in the United States, but the idea being to use social media or to use video conferencing to work with partner universities in other countries. And there are many examples of this being used successfully by staff across the world. And importantly, point 10, if you have international students in your institution, purposefully engaging international students with domestic students is also an important part of internationalisation at home. So, as I say, these are the 10 points which have recently been developed to try to get across more clearly the idea of internationalisation at home for those who are not really familiar with it. So, I should also mention internationalisation of the curriculum here, and if you're looking for literature on internationalisation at home, a lot of the parallels with internationalisation of the curriculum will become obvious. And I mentioned Betty Lesk's book, which is a really important book. So, to summarise then, proximity, bringing international and domestic students together, is not enough to create internationalisation at home. It must be intentional or purposeful. We need to think about how we're going to create an opportunity for internationalisation at home, working with all our students and engaging all staff as well. A lot of it is about the curriculum, and the curriculum aspects of this need to be driven by learning outcomes, by teaching, learning and assessment in the formal curriculum. But we must also think about the informal or co-curriculum, and I'll come back to that later in this talk. We can involve student associations because they can be very helpful in developing internationalization at home. And there are opportunities to consider this in looking at the literature. And also, we must not forget the hidden curriculum, which is something which is very difficult to think about in detail, but we must remember that we could be sending certain messages without even realizing this. So remembering the hidden curriculum is also very important. So, the question for this section then, from the perspective of your university, country or region again, what is meant by internationalization at home? What does it mean in your context? Okay, that's the end of this section, and I hope you'll have time to discuss that in groups and come up with some interesting responses for me. Thank you.